Hi, I'm Pat Humphreys from Emma's Revolution, joining you here for This Way Out's Global Queer Read-In. Today I'll be reading from the book Always Rachel. It was written by Martha Freeman and published by Beacon Press in 1995. And I'll also be quoting from an article by Maria Popova from January 2017 from her blog, Brain Pickings. The article is Rachel Carson's touching farewell to her dearest friend and beloved. Rachel was an important figure for us because of our work as activist songwriters. We were friends and were mentored by Pete Seeger. And Pete Seeger was inspired to do all the environmental work that he did on the Hudson River and around the world by Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. And some years into our Sandy's and my writing together, we were asked to write a song about Rachel Carson for the 40th anniversary of the publishing of Silent Spring. And our friends gave us a copy of this book, and it wasn't until I opened this book that I realized that Rachel Carson really had a very intense, very intimate relationship with this woman, Dorothy Freeman. And this book is a compilation of the letters back and forth between Dorothy Freeman and Rachel Carson. And, you know, in this article by Maria Popova, she talks about under the romantic ideal of love, we've come to expect that every great romance should also contain within itself, in addition to erotic passion, robust friendship. But we hold with deep suspicion the opposite, a platonic friendship colored with the emotional hues of romantic love, that never given physical form, but always aglow with an intensity artificially dimmed by the label of plain friendship. Perhaps we need not label these kaleidoscopic emotional universes after all. Perhaps resisting the urge to classify and contain is the only way to do justice to their iridescent richness of sentiment and feeling. Rachel began to spend time up in, was it Southport Island in Maine? And she eventually moved up there with her mother. And a local member of the community, Dorothy Freeman, wrote her this, beautiful, warm, welcoming letter. That letter sparked this correspondence that blossomed into, as Maria Popova says, a fast friendship aglow with anticipation of their first in-person meeting. And that meeting, Carson visited the Freemans' home and stayed for a night. Reality can so easily, this was Rachel in a letter to Dorothy. Reality can so easily fall short of hopes and expectations, especially when they've been high. She wrote to Freeman as soon as she returned home, "My dear one, there is not a single thing about you that I would change if I could." And she enclosed a verse from Keats. "A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us and a sleep full of sweet dreams." And added, "I'm certain, my dearest, that it will be forever a joy of increasing loveliness with the years, and that in the intervals when being separated, we cannot have all the happiness of Wednesday. There will be in each of our hearts a little oasis of peace and sweet dreams where the other is." She goes on in a later letter to describe their friendship as kindred spirits, but then says, For many reasons, we need all that we mean to each other probably lie at the heart of our love. But the more I think about all we both have said, the more I feel that there's something that perhaps will always remain elusive and intangible, that the whole is something more than the sum of the various reasons, she says in quotes. 2 years later, Carson writes to Freeman, and this is frequently how she started her letters. My own darling, from my birthday, this is to tell you, as if you didn't know, how dearly and tenderly I love you. You have come to occupy a place in my life that no one else could fill. And it is strange now to contemplate all the empty years when you weren't there. But perhaps we shouldn't regret those years. Perhaps instead we should just give ourselves over to wonder and gratitude that a friendship so satisfying and so full of joy and beauty could come to each of us in the middle years, when perhaps we needed it most. Darling, do you know how wonderful it is to have you? I hope you do. I love you, Rachel. And then their friendship lasted nearly a decade and reached into the last years of Rachel's life. And this is right toward the end. This was written 3 months before Rachel's death, and only delivered posthumously. When I think back to the many farewells that have marked the decade almost of our friendship, I realize they have almost been inarticulate. I remember chiefly the great welling up of thoughts that somehow didn't get put into words, the silences heavy with things unsaid. But then we knew or hoped there was always another chance, and always the letter to fill the gaps. She goes on, I have had a rich life, full of rewards and satisfactions. And then, my regrets, darling, are for your sadness, for leaving Roger, the 11-year-old son of Carson's late niece, whom she had adopted, when I so wanted to see him through manhood, for dear Jeffy, Carson's cat, whose life is linked to mine. But enough of that. What I want to write of is the joy and fun and gladness we've shared. For these are the things I want you to remember. I want to live on in your memories of happiness. I shall write more of those things, but tonight I'm weary and must put out the light. Meanwhile, there is this word, and my love will always live. Rachel. And then she says, in those last weeks, I think even, she goes on to say, this in her final letter. You are starting on your way to me in the morning, but I have such a strange feeling that I may not be here when you come. So this is just an extra little note of farewell should that happen. There have been many pains, heart, in the past few days, and I'm weary in every bone. And tonight there's something strange about my vision, which may mean nothing. But of course I thought, what if I can't write? Can't see to write tomorrow? So a word before I turn out the light. Darling, if the heart does take me off suddenly, just know how much easier it would be for me that way. But I do grieve to leave my dear ones. As for me, however, it's quite all right. Not long ago, I sat late in my study and played Beethoven and achieved a feeling of real peace and even happiness. Never forget, dear one, how deeply I have loved you all these years. Rachel.
Hi, I'm Sandy O from Emma's Revolution, and I'll be reciting Travel by Edna St. Vincent Millay for This Way Out Radio's Global Queer Read-In. This poem has always been really special to me and made even more special by the opportunity to bring it to you. I learned this poem when I was living in New York City, and there was a campaign of posters on the subway walls of poetry called Poetry in Motion. I would swear that this was the first poem that was up on those subway walls, but maybe it was just the first one I noticed. And I loved it, and every time I was traveling down to work, I would read the poem and try to remember one more line and memorize one more line. And there I was one day at work after all those trips. I started to recite the poem to myself, and it came out with a tune and with rhythm. So when I thought of this project, I wondered, could Edna St. Vincent Millay be queer? And I Googled it, and there she was. Bisexual woman, went by the name Vincent, had relationships with women and with men. So I'm proud as a bisexual woman in 2020 to be bringing you the words of this bisexual poet in our herstory. And here's how it goes. The railroad track is miles away, and the day is loud with voices speaking. Yet there isn't a train goes by all day, but I hear its whistle shrieking. All night there isn't a train goes by, though the night is still for sleep and dreaming. But I see its cinders red on the sky, and I hear its engine steaming. My heart is full with the friends I make, and better friends I'll not be knowing. But there isn't a train I wouldn't take, no matter where it's going.